Hello, everyone, and welcome to the final Big Ten Under 10 show of 2024. I'm Graham Nash. He's Adam Oppenheim, and yes, we will be back in the new year to bring you more updates from the Big Ten Conference, but the fall semester is coming to a close, and we won't have access to this lovely studio, so this will be our last show until around mid-January. Let's start today, though, on the hardwood with some volleyball, as 8 Big Ten teams made it to the NCAA tournament, which began last Thursday. However, only 5 of those Big Ten teams remain in the Sweet 16. Here's your scores from the rounds of 64 and 32. Starting with the teams that didn't make it to the Sweet 16, Minnesota took down Western Kentucky in 4 sets, but then lost to third-seeded Kentucky 3-1 in Lexington in the round of 32. USC swept UT Arlington in the first round, but then they got swept by the 2-time defending national champs in Texas on the Longhorns' home floor. Unseeded Illinois got bounced in the first round by UNI, and Washington also lost in the first round to 7th-seeded LMU. As for the teams that are still fighting, 4th-seeded Oregon swept High Point, and they took down TCU in 4 sets. They now have the tough task of taking on Pitt, who are the overall 1 seed in the tournament. Purdue, they swept unseeded Western Michigan and unseeded Loyola Chicago, but like Oregon, they now have a tall task in taking on Louisville, who is ranked 2nd in the country before this tournament began. Tough task for those 2 teams. The Cornhuskers, they swept unseeded Florida A&M and 8th-seeded Miami. They will take on 5th-seeded Dayton in the Sweet 16. Wisconsin, they swept unseeded Fairfield and then took down 7th-seed Georgia Tech in 4 sets, and they will face 6th-seeded Texas A&M. Lastly, but certainly not least, the Penn State Nittany Lions swept unseeded Delaware State, beat 8th-seeded UNC in 4 sets, and will take on 5th-seeded Marquette in the Sweet 16. Adam, so many scores, too many to count, but only 5 teams remain. Who, in your eyes, has the best chance of winning it all in the NCAA tournament?
I think it's Nebraska. I think they are the most talented team in the Big Ten, but they also have a pretty favorable path. If they win, they could possibly play Wisconsin, who they swept both times, including in Madison. I think for these Big Ten teams, it helps going on the road to those hostile environments. So when you're at sort of a neutral site, you feel pretty comfortable as a team. Penn State, I think, has a shot to go far. As for a couple other Big Ten teams, Oregon, you mentioned it, they're going to face Pitt. That's a really tough matchup. Purdue's going to face Louisville. Really another tough matchup for a Big Ten team. But that's what happens when, you play a really tough schedule and you win a lot of those games, is you get rewarded like Nebraska did with the easier path than some of these other Big Ten teams.
Yeah, and when you look forward for a team like Penn State, they would have to face Texas if they won in the Sweet 16.
Right, and Texas is a super talented team. Don't be afraid of them being a little bit underseeded because they're an experienced team. They were one of the top teams in the preseason, the top 5, and they are incredibly tough to beat. They're always around come tournament time. The Texas Longhorns always find a way to make a run.
Yeah, they've got arguably the best player in the NCAA in Madison Skinner. So if you're Penn State, you've got to make sure that you win those games. It's not going to be an easy one. We'll keep it on the hardwood with some women's basketball, which is very far away from their NCAA tournament. But conference play just began, so things are starting to get a little bit serious. Let's get you these scores. 7th-ranked Maryland took down Purdue 78-69 in West Lafayette. 6th-ranked USC took care of the Ducks in a low-scoring affair. Final score from Eugene was 66-53. The Trojans, they also beat down on Fresno State 89-40. And 17th-ranked Iowa, they were the only Big Ten team to suffer a loss last week as Tennessee took them down 78-68. 23rd-ranked Michigan took care of Northwestern 60-54 in Ann Arbor. 25th-ranked Nebraska beat down Minnesota 84-65. 12th-ranked Ohio State beat 21st-ranked Illinois 83-74 in what was the only top 25 matchup of the week. And the Buckeyes, they also took down Ball State 80-48 in Columbus. And lastly, the best team in the country still, the UCLA Bruins, took down Washington 73-62 in Seattle. Adam, Big Ten play has begun, but it's mostly gone how you would expect. No big upsets. Who has impressed you the most at this point in the season?
I think it's Maryland. I thought they were a top 25 team coming into the year, now into the top 10. Cheyenne Sellers is back for a 3rd year with the Terps, but Kayleen Schmeichel coming over from Rutgers, averaging over 17 a game. It's been impressive what Maryland has been able to create off, transfers and freshmen. They've just combined into one team that has actually worked out pretty well, which you don't exactly expect in your first few games, but you get non-conference play going and then rolling into conference play. Also, Michigan, who I think was looked at preseason as maybe a bottom 5 to 7 team in the Big Ten. 2 terrific freshmen, Olivia Olson and Silas Swords. And they have Jordan Hobbs as well as a veteran Michigan team that's well coached. You didn't think they maybe had a star player, but now they have a couple of star freshmen. And it's been impressive to see because you don't always see that, especially in Big Ten basketball, freshmen just elevating their team, scoring over 15 a game, both of them. That does not happen very often.
Yeah, and then, of course, you can't forget about the UCLAs and the USCs of the world. They've had a fantastic start.
Absolutely. 2 really talented teams coming over to the Big Ten this year. And it'll be interesting to see those road environments. Those crowds are going to show out. And how those teams fare, I think it will be really fun to see.
Yeah, hey, the Big Ten is known for some pretty aggressive basketball.
That's right.
We'll see if they can handle that environment. Well, this is usually the point where we turn and give you scores from either soccer and or field hockey, but both of those actually finished in November. So that's going to wrap up our final show of 2024. Thank you so much for tuning in. Special thanks to our producer, Colin Dusick, graphics creator Daniel Trauberman, and our teleprompter, Jesse Witt, for making all of this possible. Be sure to subscribe and follow us on Twitter and Instagram at B1G_under10. And then also check back in here in January for our next episode of Big Ten Under 10.